Hello, welcome at Vision 2024. For the next 60 minutes, we will discuss an important topic, I think so, generative AI for machine vision, or VisionGPT. And every one of us knows ChatGPT. It is a great success. And the question is, how usable could this technology, maybe generative AI for machine vision? Will machine vision be done in the future if that you just talk to an algorithm and everything is done by the machine? Or how can we ensure that AI vision can also be used by non-experts? Maybe is knowledge of optics and illumination still necessary in the future? And to discuss these topics, we have here a panel, and I started at your left side. It's Eric Carey from Teledyne Imaging, from the Vision Solutions Group. He's Vice President and General Manager. Sitting next to him is Thies Möller, Chief Engineer at Basler AG. Then it's Donato Montanari, Vice President and General Manager, Machine Vision at Zebra Technology. Then we have Ronnie Wuine. Thanks, and sorry. CEO and co-founder of Micropsy. And last but not least is Dr. Olaf Munkelt, CEO and co-founder of MVTech Software. And let's start with the definition. We will talk about VisionGPT, generative AI. Maybe someone of you can define what generative AI is. Maybe Thies?
Yep. So generative AI is a term that describes a deep neural network that has been specifically trained on the task of generating content out of a given context. This could mean you add missing text, or you generate text, or you describe an image, or you create an image out of text. So it is this generative task that you have a given context and generate new content out of it. And VisionGPT, it contains kind of our core business here, and the term GPT, which is generative pre-trained transformer, which means this is a special network technology, the transformer, which is pre-trained. Pre-trained means it's a network that is trained with a vast amount of data. And in the beginning, this was only text. And since quite some time now, these models are trained on multi-model inputs, means video input, image input, audio input, and text. And so VisionGPT describes systems where I can input text, image, video, audio, and other sources, and generate any of this at the output.
Maybe someone has another definition of you or see other topics for this? So it seems we have found a definition. That's good at the beginning. So my first question would be, what impact do generative AI models have on vision applications? Let's start for today. What's possible? Olaf.
Yeah. Before probably talk, or my colleagues talk about what's possible, I like to talk about what this current situation reminds me on. So it reminds me on like 6 years or 8 years ago, as we all heard about AI and what is possible with deep learning on images ago, so some time ago. So by that time, we were so impressed watching at pictures where you instantly could recognize, oh, this is a cat, meow, this is a dog, wow, wow. So, and then it was like, in order to get there, what do you need to classify these objects in images? We already heard this, very, very small word, vast amount of data. Yes. So, but who of you by then had 100,000 images of cats on a hard disk on your computer? Probably nobody. Who of you would be willing and able to label all these data to train the net to actually classify cats and dogs in the images? So probably nobody. So today, what I see is, again, a hype, what this technology may bring to us. And if I compare it to this 6, 8 years ago where we were, by that time and where we are now with the topic of classification in our industry, or object segmentation or object detection, I can say, wow, we have really great examples of useful and beneficial applications which really contribute to an application a lot. And this is also my view on generative AI and the application into our field. It will take years.
Ronnie, what do you think? What applications are possible at the moment, maybe in the future?
Yeah, so I'll have to talk about what we do in my company when we talk about what's possible, because we are sort of, we started 10 years ago, and this is a product that's about generating something, which is motion, and this is in real time. So we are, in a way, generative AI that has been trained to generate motion, so that's true. It's not a pre-trained transformer, because we don't have the vast amount of data, right? So the big fantasy right now is somebody at some point will have enough data to just train a single transformer, use this pre-trained foundational model, and then this solves all of robotics. The big topic here is, where do you get all this data from? Because even if you have access to every moving robot out there, your problem space is vastly different to what is being done in text and video right now. OK, so that's this part. Essentially, I'm saying I don't see it. Right? That's not happening. At least I wouldn't know how. What is possible, but that's just adjacent to the field we all work in, is, of course, you can by now render computer games instead of using a render pipeline from 3D vectors to pixels. You sort of leave out the vectors, and you render the thing directly using a generative AI. You can play Doom, and the Doom engine is not running. So that's on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, it's really impressive. So that's possible. For our field, we need to think a bit harder to make it useful, because computer vision is fundamentally about perception. That is about understanding what's out there. That's about understanding what's true. Generative AI, by definition, is making stuff up. That is something else, right? So bringing this together is going to be hard.
Donato, what do you think? Where are the applications at the moment?
I mean, this is really, really tough question. I think, on the one hand, my definition of Gen AI is very simple. It's just a tool. That's what it is. It's a tool.
Maybe we can get the longer answer.
The difference between monkeys and humans is our ability to make and use tools. And for thousands of years, we've been able to make these tools more and more effective and efficient, right? And so this is the tool. The problem is that we typically act like children, and we love our latest toy. And therefore, we only want to play with our latest toy. And now everything has to be done with Gen AI. And it just doesn't work that way, right? I mean, hey, rule-based measurement tools are perfect. Don't try to use AI for measuring stuff. There is absolutely no need, right? And the problem right now, the hype is that any problem you have to solve with Gen AI, right? And you sit in a meeting with your executives. Oh, but have you tried to use Gen AI on this to lower cost and blah, 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 right? So that's really the hype. On the other hand, we need to recognize that this is an extremely powerful tool, probably the power of which has never been seen before. And so, I love history. So it reminds me, like, when Henry Ford invented the first car, that was not a good time to be in the horse business, right? And it did take many, many years. But to me, the most important things to remember is the reason why cars were so successful in respect to horses, it wasn't the cost, it wasn't the new thing, it was the smell. Because if you were living in New York and London with all these horses, the streets were not smelling very, very well, right? And cars didn't smell. So what I'm trying to say is that we will figure out the reason why Gen AI is going to really revolutionize our business. We just haven't figured it out yet, right? But given the power of this tool, it's probably very likely that we'll find the one reason why it's going to really revolutionize our world.
I like the long answer much more than the short one. Thies, what do you think?
Yes, I agree with you. There is this hype, and in a hype phase, everyone is fascinated by new possibilities and tries to explore it. And there will be kind of, I see sometimes application where I think, this is brute forcing something that has been kind of algorithmically solved 10 years ago. And we will see this. And of course, experts in the vision industry make the right decisions on what tool to use in which application. But there are some things which makes it really powerful. And the one thing is in the generative side of generating images and scenes, even in let's say, classic rule-based machine vision, when the scenarios get more complex and are not, let's say, fully controlled environments, fully light-controlled environments, generative AI gives us very nice tools to generate scenes randomly, to create more test scenarios. This is what the automotive industry is using every day. The multi-millions of kilometers every new algorithm implementation is tested against is mostly generated by generative AI. And the nice thing of generative AI is that you can steer it in a way that you know what you will get, kind of. You can randomize it, and you have some sort of ground truth that you can work with. The other thing of generative AI is, I talked about that in the beginning it was mostly the textual world knowledge condensed, compressed into large pre-trained transformers. And what we do every day in doing decisions on how to set up vision systems, how to optimize them, a lot of this knowledge is distilled in there. So there I see a large benefit of having the perfect assistant for vision experts to have access to the distilled knowledge. And you can even enrich it with your company knowledge in this case.
So Eric, it's hard for you to find new topics, but I'm quite sure you will be able.
I'm going to follow up on the Thies topic because it's really how I see things. You know, in our industry, we've been working with AI for a number of years. So far, it's been mostly with neural nets, and we see here we have a number of products on the show floor where we basically inspect components. And I see that this evolution took a number of years, so it takes some time for the technology to become mature. Looking at what we have right now, I see that more as an operator on an inspection line. So it's looking, let's say, at bottles, if the bottle is good or bad, if there are some defects. So it's kind of a repetitive task that has been implemented using those neural networks. With generative AI, as Thies was doing, it's getting a step higher than that. It's more like an assistant. It's going to enable the designer of those machine vision systems to ask questions to get some information. And the nice thing with generative AI is we can tailor the models that are used, basically the large language models that are used within the framework to use the information and the data that is specific to each of our companies. So we can tap into that mass of information that we have at each of our company and augment the existing models to basically to fix problems and to provide solutions, provide assistance to the different machine vision problems we're trying to address. So I find this very, very interesting that we can combine those existing large language models with the capacity and the data that we have within each of our company, combine that together and provide some context and figuring out some solution.
Thanks. There's another question. Machine vision is not easy to use. Usually it's a little bit complicated sometimes. How can generative AI models improve usability and create new user-friendly interfaces? Do you think this is possible? Thies, you were the first who said yes, so you have to answer.
Of course, not 100%, but what you will get is you can make the first mile quick. You can reduce your solution space size, for example. And when you come into, let's say, application scenarios where the person who really knows what happens in an application is not the imaging expert, is not the vision expert, he can describe what happens. And this is one of the strengths of GPT. used in vision context, to be able to convert kind of the textual description of, for example, an anomaly on a product into possibly choosing the right first tools to detect it, choosing the right first strategy. So there we see this as a great chance to have a much more, let's say, end-user friendly application interface to the start for a vision application. I'm not that convinced that you will do it 100% in short time, but the first steps.
Donato?
Yeah, so along those lines, again, Gen AI as a tool can help, machine vision engineers in configuring devices, and that's something that we are experimenting with. We have a product that it's supposedly easy to use, is a 3D profiler, and our definition of easy to use is that you have to set 300 parameters to make it work, and you have to be an expert. It's really tough parameters, right? And so what we've done, we've taken ChatGPT, our Zebra version of ChatGPT. We have trained this version of ChatGPT with the user manual of the product, right? And then we have created this, chat API where we go, hey, I'm inspecting a cogwheel, it's 5 by 5, and I want to know the thickness and blah, 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 and then ChatGPT goes and configure the 300 parameters. And it is easy to tell them, hey, if you're not really sure, don't touch that, and tell me what you don't touch. And so now you have to go and touch only 2 or 3 of the 300, right? Yep. And I think that this sort of applications where we are really like a companion, right? I think in machine vision would be probably becoming more and more frequent.
I'm not quite sure if Ronnie is convinced.
No, actually, on this I am. I want to second that, because we're staying in the domain of language here, right? The ChatGPT, OpenAI stuff has been trained on pretty much all the language we have, right? All of the internet in its written form has been pushed or is being pushed through these models. And what that does is that it not only sort of captures all the knowledge that's in the internet, it also captures a lot of the logic of how ideas are being combined. And that is, of course, immensely powerful, and we don't even see to the other side of how powerful this is going to be. So in all applications like these, where we sort of turn a generic system into an expert system by adding some data and adding some domain knowledge, while staying in the domain of language, talking about things, I think we don't even understand the potential for what's going to be possible there. So yeah, user interfaces are going to be easier to configure, and also natural language for tasks where this is the right modality can be the actual user interface. So I agree, this will work.
Olaf?
Yeah, to the last point, I also would agree. Also what the gentleman said. And a very good comment is, what material has been used to train ChatGPT? And sure, we can say it has been trained on whatever library, whatever visual data, whatever text language, spoken language is available in any language. But there's one important piece missing over here. I hope it's not trained on our IP data in our company. Other than that, I would have a problem with our IT department. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of IP in the companies which has to do with the business model of each company. And none of these data, hopefully, have found their way into ChatGPT. So if you flip this around, this means that if you asked Flip GPT, please do this and that, or find this and that in the image using a script language which is developed by this and that company, you will not get any useful answer. So this looks at different points, my comment. Before I go into detail, I would hand over the question there to you. But one more point. What I like is that the ability to retrain even this large language models. And if this would be better, I can add something, and I can probably also run it on premise, question mark. And I may be able to use this large language model or this transformation model without having any IP issues, like we see that New York Times is going after Meta because of the data they have used in the language model.
Yep. Okay.
I think Eric could be first, and then.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go on this one, but I really like the fact that you say the data is important, the IP is important, and at our company we take that very seriously, and that's the reason why a lot of the work we're doing with generative AI remains basically inside the company. It's not necessarily something we're going to offer outside, but it's help as an assistant to a lot of the engineers, the support people, the fact that you could read through all the documentation and help your frontline support people to get the question and answer rapidly. This is things that are very applicable today and that we can do in a very short amount of time. Other aspects we're looking at a lot is also code generation. You know, there's a lot of information on the web about the various API from the various companies in machine vision. So it's not perfect. It's, as Thies was mentioning, you can get a crude first pass of the skeleton of your program. But at least, you know, when you want to translate, let's say you want to transfer from one SDK to another SDK, you can get a very good first pass of what to do. And obviously, you need to do maybe the last 20% of the cleaning up. But it helps you to kickstart the work, essentially.
Thies?
Yeah, what I want to also go on this point that Olaf made is that there's this IP topic, which could be the company IP or could be IP from projects, which definitely should never go out of the company. But what this, let's say, generic large language model gives you is a way to understand your human described question and map it then to your company internal technology, like in your support systems. And this is enormous time saver for organizations in our industry. And this frees up time to do, let's say, more work on let's say, new projects in this case.
Next question. Who will be the users of such systems? Companies like yours, system integrators, or machine builders? Donato.
Yeah, I think that to a certain extent, everyone will be using it. The problem is that a lot of people will be using it without knowing that they're using it. Because it's going to get so deep in our infrastructure, and which raises really a concern that I totally share with all of which is the security of it, right? And the IT rights and all of that. And it's a big problem. And like any other tools, it's easy to misuse it. And I'll give you an example that is in the public domain. A very famous large multinational. They had this internal meeting to discuss roadmaps, and then the guy in charge had this brilliant idea to ask ChatGPT to summarize the meeting notes. And without knowing that you can actually export data from ChatGPT. So somebody said, what are the roadmaps of this company? And they got the roadmaps. Right? So like any other tools, we need to understand it. You know, we need to constrain it, and we need to be able to use it, and we need to have some sort of police force that enforces how to use it, right? But I do believe that everyone will be willingly or unwillingly using Gen AI in the next few years.
What do you think? Who will be the users? Eric?
I guess everybody's going to be the users, but at different levels. So internally, obviously, we're using that, and yes, we could do a summary of meetings. We're doing that at my company, but we're not using ChatGPT. We're using Copilot, and Copilot offers some level of protections to protect our data, so it remains local. So, but it's so interesting. You know, we can gain so much time having those teams meeting, having the summary, can extract basically some action items from the discussion. So this is like more an internal in terms of the operations. But obviously, we're also going to, we envision using that to help our application engineers to pick the right components, the right camera, right size, depending on the application we're trying to do. So it's going to be used differently at different levels. We're going to use different models to do that. And it's important to understand also that apart from model, it's possible to inject some proprietary data within a question. And right now, actually, Copilot, you can already do that. You can provide some additional documentation and ask the question. And rather than just relying on the model itself, it's going to use the data provided to provide a much more granular piece of information to answer your questions.
Yeah, users, like in your question, will in the end will be everyone. And I agree, sometimes you will not even realize that you're using a generative AI tool under the hood. But like I mentioned, it's not perfect what comes out of those systems. But it gives you a good first indication in which direction to go. And this of course means that we somehow have to manage the risk of someone assuming that this is the right solution and just going with it. And with a differing user basis of, let's say, VisionGPT, we have to be very careful about managing these expectations. And for example, in a Vision expert will look at the result and say, okay, this is 90% right, and I will do this tweak here, and then it's okay. But if you maybe give it to someone who assumes, okay, it's given from the AI system from Basler, and this must be right, something like this. This wouldn't work without a management of, let's say, the risk and rigorous testing and whatever. Yeah.
So I have a question. Who's responsible if something going wrong? Maybe I use one of these companies, a product, and something is getting wrong. And as you mentioned, usually an expert sees the mistake, but charm of ChatGPT is I do not know anything about the topic, ask a question, get an answer and use it. So what happens if the user can't see the mistake and is using the system without controlling it? Yeah. Olaf.
I think the first point is that it has to be clear to the user who's responsible for what when he starts using it. So if I would use a system where I ask, give me a code snippet to find circles in the image, and this is based on ChatGPT, just assume that, then I would probably have a note somewhere saying, this answer is based on ChatGPT. So like a copyright notice. There are legal implications to these questions, which are hard to answer at this point in time. But basically, it's used at your own risk at this point. And there's no guarantee, there's no willingness also of the large manufacturers of foundation model offers that they resume responsibility for the actual answer. So in the first version of ChatGPT, I asked, do you know this and that gentleman? And then the answer was, this and that gentleman unfortunately passed away 3 years before. And I said this to this gentleman which was sitting in front of me. So you sometimes get totally wrong answers
making
from
stuff up? Yes.
These devices. Yeah, he's still alive. Yeah, very well.
So we're happy. Ronnie.
So, I mean, we are familiar with these situations, right? This is not the first time this happens in technology history, that new technology comes along and it's not perfect. It doesn't solve the problem fully. So it needs human supervision, and everybody in the chain needs to assume that the human supervision ultimately takes responsibility. And of course, the rest, you can push that around legally, right? You can try to push it down to the guys who made the models, and then they will relay to the New York Times, because that's where the data comes from, apparently. Right, so you can play these games, but it's not that there's this entity AI that anybody can assume is more right. But that fades away over time, right? So over the next 20 years, for instance, in the domain of code generation, this stuff works so well that I will assume that my job, computer science, writing code, changes so fundamentally that for the most common languages, for the most common types of problems, you will just not have to ask the question who's responsible for any mistakes anymore, because it will just work so well that your usual techniques for preventing error will just be enough and will work, and then whoever puts it out is responsible, but it doesn't matter because the problem isn't so large anymore.
Donato?
Yeah, going back to your question, who's responsible if something goes wrong, right? Well,
it wasn't me, I'm quite sure.
Yeah, but I was getting. So if you read the terms and conditions of ChatGPT when you sign up, you know exactly who's not responsible, right? They're like at least 10 pages in which they outline how they're not responsible for anything you can do. But there are also another 10 pages that really states what they can do with your data, right? And are you willing to provide data to them? And I think that this is really a concern that I do have in machine vision. I think that if and when Gen AI becomes prevalent as a tool, there should be transparency into that. You know, I as a user should know that the model that you actually, or whatever you have given me as being generated with AI 80% or 22%, right? I should have that information. And then it's up to me to decide what I want to do with it, right? But I think that the problem is that sometimes we think that, you know, humans had made something, and no, it's not that way, in good and bad. Humans make mistakes too. So to me, the question is really, what is the transparency that we can get when we use Gen AI?
Tease.
Yeah, I want to jump into this responsibility thing, and we could ask ourselves, should we stop working on this because it's unclear who's responsible and the systems might be too complex to handle. And I agree with you that it should be open, and all involved parties should know that there's some generative AI involved in the task, because we already see now that there are applications where your, let's say, the scene is highly unstructured and difficult to manage, even with, let's say, AI systems we have in the last years. We already see, wow, this is now possible. It's not perfect, but new things get possible. And we as the industry have to, let's say, experiment with this and be open for this. But of course, everyone in the project has to know that it is kind of, we are trying something new. We get better, maybe even get better, for example, like a human doing the same task, which also makes mistakes. And then I think we will come to the point, like you said in the beginning, this new tool, in a few years, we will know this is the application to solve with this. And we have to work on it to get to this point quick.
So what we were saying at the beginning, this is used as an assistant. And you know, as an assistant, you're still responsible as you, if you're the engineers or the person in charge of a project, to double check the information and then to finalize everything. So I see it that way. I mean, it's a tool. It's something that you can leverage to be more productive. But at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you have the right answer. It's no different to me than if you're asking a colleague which doesn't have, let's say, all the expertise in a certain domain, and you're using his input into your project. I mean, humans are also making mistakes. The machine may make mistakes, for sure. We know that. There are ways to, with prompt engineering, there are ways to make sure we have maybe more accurate response from the system. As I said earlier, there are ways to inject additional data which pertain to the question that you're going to ask to make sure you have a more precise answer. So, but at the end of the day, it's your responsibility when you use that. And it's very important to understand that if you're passing along, as we were talking, information to other colleagues, and that's been generated through AI, it's important to understand that it's an AI-based solution. It's not like a human checked.
Thanks.
Yeah, one more comment on that. I think we have seen many new technologies over the last 20, 30 years or so. I'm now a little bit on a higher flight level looking at autonomous driving cars. There has been a very long discussion in this community. So how do we handle this responsibility issue, and what kind of tasks can we hand it over to the car? What is autonomous? What is not autonomous? And what levels do we have? And now they have 5 levels. They have developed this many years ago. But they define a clear framework what you can expect from that system as a technical system. And I also think that this is probably a way to bring more transparency in this technology, and also to make it more easier to understand for the customer what is the responsibility of the vendor of that product and what is your responsibility as a user of that product.
Thanks. What do you think is needed that more generative AI systems are used? Faster hardware or simpler software, more experts who can use these systems, or more database? What is needed to get the next step?
I think that what we see is very impressive. For assistance for coding, assistance for explanations, or, you know, for example, in our products we have, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of pages of user manuals, yeah? It would be a benefit already to simply let the user ask, by the way, I want to find ICs in the image. What would you propose? And then it gets you a condensed and good description. This already is an added value in itself. So if we come to this point, we learn along the way. And if I would then, you know, make the step into the real hardcore image processing side, I think then these huge models, they have to be shrinked. So they have to be way smaller. And I'm very confident that one way or the other this will happen. Because we saw this like 6-8 years ago as well with these huge nets. And everybody said, oh, do we have float? Do we have 2 byte? Do we have int? What is it? And then there was a big stream of new models and of new condensed models, and now these models with the appropriate data, they run on embedded devices. So what was impossible like a few years ago is possible now. So that makes me very confident if I look even at the large language models. So that's why hard to answer to say we need more software, we need more faster hardware. So I would see this goes both in the right direction.
I've got the easiest job. I make the questions, not the answers.
Yes.
Ronnie, what do you think is necessary for the next step?
So I would agree, right? Being able to run it on human-sized devices, not multi-billion data centers, would be very nice. And we're going to see this for inference. It's already happening. The one big difference here is the training is very expensive, and it's going to stay very expensive because this data collection effort, you can't just not open source, right? That's the unique mode that the people who have built these systems have. Now, what's playing for us all here is that Meta, Facebook, has essentially decided to deny this advantage to OpenAI. So they're just, whenever OpenAI does something, Meta just pays for doing the same at roughly the same quality and giving it away for free. So that'll be useful for everybody because that means they're generating an open source community around those models and around the local runnability of those models. So answer is, I'd like to see more of that because it will sort of crack that kind of scary monopoly that OpenAI, Microsoft are clearly in the business of building right now around the models they have.
Donato.
I think on the tech side, one, in my opinion, important challenge that we have to solve is the fact that Gen AI is not very green and is not very clean. If you try to measure in CO2 emissions, all these data servers and all these, monster systems that run the thing is actually pretty scary, right? So I think that sometime, somehow, should start addressing that problem. How can we take power consumption down? How can we make these servers not needing their own power station just to operate, right? And to me, this if you look at the speed at which it's growing, like ChatGPT, they were able to do, I think, 100 million users in 1 month. If you look at that sort of scales and you translate that in new power station that you need for the servers that run this 100 million, it's concerning, very concerning.
Who likes?
Yeah, for me is also in the direction of when I look at what machine vision industry is tackling a lot of times is not only to be precise in a decision on an image taken, on some measurement taken from it, but also when you have it. So it's determinism because you're typically part of a production machine and you have a fixed budget of milliseconds to solve your task. And currently, typically when you use VisionGPT to reason on an image or in a complex scene, you will send this into a data center. And yes, of course, you can get service level agreements with everyone along the line up to the data center and back to get your in millisecond answer. But typically, you want this on premise or you want this on the edge. And so I'm fully agree with you that what we need is kind of the experts and the software to bring this technology on more manageable hardware.
Eric, do you?
It's pretty much the same thing. You know, we have right now very generic models. ChatGPT is a general model. There are ways to create models which are more specific to the different applications, and I think that's one step in that direction. But still, those models are way bigger than what we can do on most of the premises or on Edge AI. So there's a huge step that needs to be done, and probably we'll need to figure out ways to have maybe, maybe incremental models to try to help and solve the problem in the smaller pieces rather than having just one model that does it all.
Thanks. How do you ensure that your generative AI models remain robust across different environments and product variations? Maybe I have a blue part, everything is fine, then it's getting green and nothing works anymore.
Yeah. Okay, let me be a little bit controversial here. Actually, the fact is you don't. Right? I mean, it's like saying, how do you guarantee that the world doesn't change? It does. I mean, live with it, right? So the world changes, your factory changes, everything changes, so that model has to change. So the real question is, how do you keep the model current with the changes that you are experiencing in the environment, right? And that's the challenge, and that's why, you know, I really believe that, you know, again, cloud training, model management, model deployment, the whole end-to-end is an infrastructure that every end user will have to develop eventually.
Olaf.
Yeah, there's a hope that it will get better, but if I look at our experience with the standard deep learning and the models which we trained and the data which we used, there was the expectation in the beginning, well, if I can solve a classification task for bearings, I probably can solve this also for other metal sheet plates or something like that. So there's certain similarity in between. But honestly, that's not the case. So every single deep learning application is a new deep learning application. So they don't scale very well. This is the current situation. And I don't see from the technical side how that could change for generative AI models. And you have to do a retraining or a re-instantiation of the data. This will not work that it learns along the way in itself. So at this point, I don't see this. And this is one of the promises, by the way, which deep learning failed to keep. That, if you do this, you can do a similar thing as well with what you have done before. This is actually not true in an industrial application. Not talking about cats and dogs, okay?
Any more comments?
Yeah, it's actually worse for generative, right? Because the promise here, if there's any difference to just a neural network, it's that it's been pre-trained, so it needs to have seen everything, right? So if it has seen everything, then yes, your model is going to be robust, but it will not have seen everything, right? It will need to do some abstraction. And how do you foresee what data you need to put in there to make and keep it robust? So if anything, it's even worse than with classic neural networks.
Yeah, there's one part of it, I agree. It's one thing is kind of how does it stay robust with changing environments. I think it's the same with rule-based tools. Kind of you parameterize them for one application, and when the application changes, this might need a reparameterization. This is, let's say, the normal business. Of course, maybe there's the assumption that it will magically do this. And with the neural network approaches that we use today, which are targeting typically to have size-optimized implementations, to be fast and power efficient. These are typically, like you said, Olaf, they are optimized for an application. When I look into the future, what generative AI can also do is one thing is, of course, to understand complex scenes. On the other side, it can generate much more augmentation data to extend your, let's say, your classic AI approach, and make it easier to make the AI more robust. The classic kind of a classic simpler approach.
Now I ask a lot of questions, but maybe you have also some questions. If yes, just give me a sign and I will come with a microphone. So here are the experts.
Thank you very much for your comments. I'm not sure if you are going to deliver AI models in your companies. If so, I would like to know your opinion about the European AI law and how that will affect you as AI suppliers in the future.
Is there an answer?
Can you repeat the question, because we have no monitors over here, and I had a hard time to understand the question.
Yeah. Okay.
Just say the same thing again.
Yeah, my question is, if you are going to deliver AI models in the future as part of a product in your companies, how the European AI law is going to affect you and how that will affect the development of your models?
So the question is whether the European regulations affect us.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure, they affect us. Next question, please.
Disclaimer. Maybe as the NATO, maybe there's a long answer.
I work for an American company, so they don't. But I think, let me perhaps take the direction in a little bit of a different way. I think you raise an extremely valid point. Right? There has to be regulation at some point. Right? And the first step is transparency, and the second step is regulation. I think that one of the problems that we have today is that a lot of the users don't really understand, like the same, when Facebook first started, right? People don't understand that they are the product, right? That is not free. The mindset that we have, oh, Facebook is free, ChatGPT is free. No, it's not. You're paying with your data, and data today is probably more valuable than gold, right? And I think that the first thing needs to happen is this consciousness. And once we have that, then we can put rules around it. And I'm not very familiar with the specific AI rules that the European community put in place, but I'm very familiar with, the privacy law, and we actually, of which Germany was one of the big, and they are phenomenal, and we have to go this way. We need to protect our own data, and privacy is very, very important. With that said, there are always this sort of going around the rules, right? The disclaimer. So click here to, so that you can allow me to track you. And if you don't click, then you can use my services. But definitely, this needs to be regulated because the tool is so powerful that there has to be regulation.
Everything cleared? Or do you have another question? I'm standing here, so before I get up, Now it's the time for another question, maybe. All are too shy. Okay. How quickly do you think generative AI will find its way into image processing, or is it already here?
I'm not quite sure whether...
Eric.
I can.
Sorry, Eric.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so I mean, it's already possible today to use a generative AI in image processing. I mean, it's very early in the process, but it's there. We can do that. I mean, we mostly do that internally. Obviously, when you mentioned about regulation and so on, that's the reason also we want to be really careful about what we're releasing to our customers. So there's a lot of experimentation performed, I'm sure, in each of our companies. We're trying to do that in sandbox to make sure we're not leaking any of our data, but image processing is one of those things.
Any more comments?
Yeah, I think that
can just agree. Yes, it exists. It is possible, and we are all exploring the tool and finding the good solutions for it. But one main point, and I really like to reiterate on it, that it allows you, because it learned, let's say, all visible scenes on this planet, or a lot of it. So it is possible to generate training data for machine vision. So if you ask if generative AI is already in machine vision, yes it is. Maybe not in the processing side, but in the tool generation side.
Olaf?
Yeah, I think that if you look a little bit further, in 2 years we will have the next vision, and I'm very confident that we'll see some applications based on Gen AI, also on the image processing side.
Okay, maybe can we start with the final question? What will we see in 2 or 3 years from your companies with generative AI? Olaf?
Yeah, I think the most promising or the most benefit at this point in time are the assistants we talked about. These little pieces which help our customers, which are mostly developers for machine vision applications, to more quickly set the application up, either via education, either via support questions they can raise, either because they have a personalized documentation if they ask questions. I think this would be the first step.
Oni?
Yeah, we're getting close to releasing features that are based on pre-trained models. So they're not generating anything because we're fundamentally about perception, except for the motion part of what the robot does. But the pre-trained part starts to work for some very specific things, where also our models, which are trained on industrial data, start to outperform stuff that's been trained on cats and dogs. So that's starting to work, and it's slowly finding its way into the products. How much better that will be, it's a marginal increase for now, because really what the pre-trained models for these applications do is just give you features to work with on higher levels. So it's only marginally better than sort of the general content that the stable diffusions of this world have seen.
Donato?
So I think that Gen AI could be very, very beneficial to the machine vision market as a whole. And what I mean by that is that machine vision is very complex to use. Therefore, in certain markets, it doesn't make any sense. The ROI is just not there, right? Because the time and the development that it takes, to deploy it doesn't matches what you gain out of it. So if you can actually make the complexity somehow diminish because you're using Gen AI, then you potentially open a lot of markets. And I think that this is really something that I look forward to in the next 2 or 3 years.
Thanks. Peace.
Yeah, as a hard and software manufacturer, we also see, if we look into the 3-year future, that we will have systems which are perfectly aligned and allowing to use AI and generative AI in a way that is efficient, is total cost of ownership perspective on this thing. And the other side is definitely the user interface side. So lowering the access level to go to complex vision systems by having a natural language front end that allows you to describe your task.
Eric.
I think to finish, I mean, if you're looking 2-3 years, we also need to look at what's open source, what is coming from the market, because it's going to influence a lot the value add we're going to have into our Gen AI products. So we're monitoring that. Obviously, I think the main differentiator is the data that we have within our company that we could help to leverage. So I think we're talking about assistant. I think this is like a very feasible first step for us. We're going to rely on some of the open source models, obviously trying to augment them with some of our information. And those models are growing so fast, it's exponential, that it's very hard to imagine where we will be in 2 or 3 years. If you go back and you look in your, where ChatGPT was a few years ago versus where it is today, it's totally different. And we know the growth is exponential. So I think the open source movement is going to have a huge, huge impact on each of our companies and the way we use AI internally.
So I think these are the perfect last words for our panel discussion. I would like to say thank you to my panel. Thank you for the audience. So stay tuned. Have a nice day here at Vision. A lot of things are here to see, to find. And I hope you will have a good day. And once again, thanks.
Thank you.
Dankeschön.
Thank you, Emperor.